Hi, everybody. This is Yanis, and this is another episode of our podcast. And I'm joined today by a special guest.
Hi, I'm Regina. I used to work in academia for 22 years. I was a law professor. And 2 years ago, I became a full-time professional coach. So now I'm here invited kindly by Yanis as my role as a life coach.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. Trying to make a podcast and reach an audience is always an exciting thing to do, because there might be people around there who haven't actually experienced us in our professional engagement that will have an opportunity to see us through this podcast, get to know who we are and what we do. And I'm hopeful that some of the things that we say are going to be useful for somebody who's listening. And to get us started, we can discuss about the topic that we have for today, which is confidence in general and confidence specifically in academia. So you've worked in academic environments in the past. Now you're working with clients from within the academic environment. How important would you say that confidence is as a concept in academic environment?
I think actually everywhere in life, professional life and private life, and especially in academia, confidence is really the cornerstone. And what is confidence? Well, the lack of confidence for me is a kind of worrying, fear, anxiety, and all of this blocks what we want to do. What do we want to do in academia? Well, put it in a nutshell, we want intellectual quality, analytical mind, focus, research. So it's really about a focused, clear mind, and also about creativity, because we want to find new things, ask new questions, be innovative. And as soon as we have these anxieties, worries, lack of confidence kicking in, both of these are blocked. The analytical mind, the focused mind, and the creativity. So I think a lack of confidence undermines everything you'd like to do in academia and what academia is really about. And this is just the work itself. Of course, also you need the confidence to present your ideas, whether it's in research or in the teaching.
Do you think that confidence links up with what we keep hearing about, this idea of imposter syndrome and feeling that you don't belong in a space? What is the link between one and the other?
I don't know if it's true, but I think confidence is Latin for with trust. That might be not the right, I might not remember this correctly. So if you don't have confidence, we're lacking the trust. And I think this is what happens if you have the imposter syndrome. You don't trust yourself that you belong there, that you're good enough, that you fit in. For me, suffering imposter syndrome to whatever extent is a lack of confidence to a certain extent. So for me, it's actually quite similar, same thing. Yeah.
I think this is something that really afflicts academics. If you walk, and actually at any career level and at any level of seniority, I think anybody who walks into a room with people that they know to be important in the field or successful or known, you're suddenly beginning to think, am I okay to be here? Do I belong in here? How do they see me? And any anxiety that you've got about your own status or achievement can be amplified when you're faced with people that you think are somehow superior in a way. Now, how do you react to this? It might be, or to learn how to react effectively to this could be something that you require support with. A lot of people that I know and myself, we struggle with this, and perhaps struggling on your own isn't the right way to go about it.
I think maybe it's especially true in academia because it's a very competitive field, because you're constantly tested. So whether you present your teaching in front of a huge class or a small specialized class or at a conference, constantly you're kind of exposing your knowledge, your ideas, and you're tested. So it's and you want to be cutting edge at the same time. So it's uncharted ground. So per definition, you don't know whether you are good enough or whatever standard we are talking about. So I think, yes, you're right, academia is particularly prone to this worry, am I good enough? Because the standards are not objective. We all know from the RAF how subjective the criteria are. So it's very difficult to know where are we actually, how good are we? And then we see all the others seemingly being so confident, of course, not showing that they might also have a problem with imposter syndrome. So I think, we are in an environment where we constantly expected to excel and to show and to present ourselves excelling. And showing that we and our department, our university is best in the world. And at the same time, it can be a very lonely place where you're not allowed to show that you're lacking this, that you're suffering from these doubts and lack of trust.
This is a good, it's a good issue that you're raising. It is a competitive environment, and it's an environment where everybody is so invested in projecting a picture of success.
Yeah.
So if you're doubtful about the quality of your work or the success of your work, or, confident about your ability to effectively operate as a teacher, perhaps, and you're surrounded by people who continuously tell you that everything is awesome. Have you watched the Lego movie? where the character goes around singing everything is awesome. I've sat through a lot of departmental meetings when I'm feeling that I'm an extra in that movie, where everybody's telling me what a great time they're having. Maybe everything's not awesome all the time, but it's difficult, since very few people acknowledge having issues. It is very difficult to think that it's a normal thing to have doubts about yourself, to have doubts about your performance.
And unfortunately, sometimes it's also competitive in a nasty way, where colleagues consciously or subconsciously are actually jealous of your success. That sometimes is especially a problem for younger colleagues, where more senior colleagues are a bit worried that these younger colleagues are suddenly excelling, coming with their bright ideas, are so popular with the students. And sometimes this is where hurdles are put in our way, because people don't want you to be that successful, that popular. I hope that's the exception, but I know this happens.
Well, I'm trying to be upfront about this. So when colleagues get promoted and I haven't, I go up to them and I say, I'm so happy for you and I hate you so much. So they know that it's eating me on the inside, but I acknowledge it in order to maintain our friendship and relationship. Maybe they don't like me after that as much as I think.
Very fair, very open. I've never heard this before.
Well, we tend to blame management both for the good things and the bad things. So hopefully it doesn't affect our personal relationships. But to come back to what I was saying earlier, I do find it difficult when not many people in your community acknowledge the difficulties. It leads you to think that you're struggling on your own. And then it can enhance, if already your confidence is a little bit shaken, or perhaps something has gone wrong. Because on occasion, in the normal run of things, this might not be an issue at the foreground of your thoughts, but maybe something happens. Maybe you get a student evaluation that is poor, or maybe you get sort of, passed on for a promotion application, or you apply for a grant and you don't get it. It could be this particular event that derails you and then makes you question yourself. And I think, again, this can be an issue where if you're struggling on your own, then you might find it difficult to overcome.
Absolutely. And it just becomes bigger and bigger in your head. And there are two little examples. One is where I started to teach in a completely new model for me. And I asked a colleague from a tutorial question. I don't know the answer. What should I say here? And he afterwards played it against me, showed me off that I didn't know this. And I thought, okay, that shows me not to ask questions if I don't know, or be very careful who I would ask. And the other example is we have an amazing colleague. She is so clear, so well articulated, so popular. I really admire her. And I went to lectures to learn from her. And later I found out she is suffering from huge imposter syndromes. And you think, how can this be? Because she does everything perfect. Sometimes she suffered even without there being an external event. But this fantastic lecturer didn't feel she could speak to anybody about it. So nobody knew about it.
And also the external impression of what's going on is hiding a lot of things. For instance, if you watch one of my videos on my YouTube channel, you get this impression that, oh, this is a very nice, very articulate man. You don't know that for every 2-minute video, there's like half an hour of me going, and mixing my words together. And all this mess has been edited out. So the end impression is one of competent professionalism, I hope, but nobody knows the sort of background mess that was before that the edited version was created.
I remember when I went to my first conference and there's this nice introduction. So Professor blah, blah, blah was amazing and he did this and this and this. And I thought, oh, I hope one day somebody says this about me. And then I realized they all wrote it themselves.
Yes. As we're recording this sort of mid-September, right before we start classes for the new academic year, I'm thinking about a lot of our new colleagues who are coming in. These are either people who have been hired recently and are joining teaching staff for the first time, or PhD students that are going to be given a teaching task for the first time. Do you have any particular advice for the people who are to set off in their teaching career and they experience a live classroom for the first time?
I think teaching for not just the first time, but maybe for the first period is really tough because and very scary, very scary. I can't take these worries away and these fears away, but there are three things I would like to suggest. And the first one is it's absolutely normal. It is a test situation. You're standing in front of a class, everybody's looking at you. So it's like in an exam. So it's normal for the human being to be stressed, and you feel it in your body, you get a dry mouth or higher heart rate or whatever. So you can't help it. It's absolutely normal. And unfortunately, to some extent, you will have this until the end of your career. It's just normal stage fright. So kind of think it's normal. It's not just me. It's a physical reaction. The other thing is, what you might want to do is, if you have a minute of time and if you're brave, to ask yourself, what exactly are you worried about? Is it that you say something wrong? Is it that you're boring? Is it that people will laugh at you? Is it that you're a horrible teacher and your career's ended? What is it exactly? And remember, these are irrational thoughts. So don't brush them away and saying that's stupid. Just feel what it feels like. And once you're brave enough to actually see what exactly is the problem, that might be more than one, then you can face it. The third one, which helped me the most, was trying to change the focus away from you to them. So try moving away from, I am boring, I will be in trouble, everybody hates me, to then, how can I serve the students? How can I make this class great for the students? What do I want from this class? Do I want to be very clear, very structured? Do I want it to be inspiring? Do I want to motivating? What does it want? And try to focus on that, and then, rather than your little self. And I know it's easier said than done, but it does help, because energy follows your thought, and you will be more focusing on the subject, and it will be better, and you will enjoy it much more.
When I started teaching, I was a fresh PhD student at the University of Kent in the early 2000s. Part of the program was to have a teaching evaluation by another member of staff. And of course, my concern at the time was exactly as you described, that I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm boring, that the students are not engaging. And the head of school at the time came to sit in one of my contract law tutorials. And while I put on what I believe to be a very engaging, enthusiastic performance, he fell asleep. Even though he was sitting first row, he fell asleep. Everybody thought that this was hilarious, but it didn't necessarily help with my inner concern that my class might be boring. Perhaps it says more about his engagement with the processor than my class, but it is going to be a big problem. Young colleagues who are faced with a student audience are finding it increasingly difficult. One of the things that has happened to us is that post-pandemic, both ourselves and the students have got trouble engaging in real life in-class interactions. One of the bizarre things that we've experienced since we came back from the pandemic is that we tried during the lockdowns to bring the physical into the virtual. So we tried to create with our Zoom meetings, with Teams meetings and so on, with the online classrooms, we tried to recreate in the virtual space the experience that we would have if we were all in the same classroom. This succeeded, sometimes failed in others. What nobody was expecting was that when we returned to the physical domain, the virtual came with us. And we now have students in a classroom who are looking at their phones, or they're locked on their eyes and locked onto their computer screens while you're in the same room talking to them. So to get them to look up from the screen is to just walk in front of them and try to attract their attention. And I'm not suggesting that they're not paying attention. They are. Yeah. But they got used to operate in a virtual multi-screen, multi-things to do space. And they've carried this with them even when they are physically present in a room with a teacher. And another thing that has happened is that there seems to be limited interaction between them. So they interact, even though we're all in the same classroom, they interact one-on-one when the teacher is talking to them, but they don't talk to each other. Well, in the past, they would be more keen to talk to each other than they would be talking to the teacher.
I noticed this. I used to have my office outside the classroom, and just before the class started, it was really loud because all the students are in front of my room waiting. Now, well, at the end, it was completely quiet because students are not talking. There were 20 people on their phone.
That is true. They queue and wait outside the class for the class to start, and they don't talk to each other. I came in early one day, and I walked into a classroom, and the classroom was full, and nobody would say a word. They were all totally focused on their phones. So I don't think there's something wrong with these kids. What is wrong is physical environment has been degraded by the experience of the pandemic, and how our first reaction point and our first connection point seems to be the virtual as opposed to the real.
The kids, because go to a departmental meeting, if you still have them, and seeing how many people are on the phone, how many staff members.
Oh, yeah. One of them is me.
You probably have 3 phones.
Yes, because we are we feel that we're not engaged unless we're multitasking. So you can simultaneously check your emails and listen to somebody presenting something and kind of whisper to the colleague next to you at the same time. And now that is normal, where it just used to be rude. Now, of course, the person listening to this podcast is probably listening it on a headset while they're making some pasta for dinner. So if this is you, don't let your water boil over. We know what you're doing. What we're discussing so far, I think we already touched upon the realization that confidence is an issue at any level for anybody. At any career level, it's a problem for students, it's a problem for academics. So it's a sort of pervasive issue that we need to get used to dealing with and find effective ways to deal with it.
In my opinion, confidence is really like the cornerstone in academia, both, as you said, for students and staff. And it is expected and it's necessary, but it's not sufficiently furthered or developed. We get training on how to cite resources. We get training on how to present a paper. We don't get training on how to develop our confidence.
We tend to get training on what they call various skills, but I haven't sat in a training that is specific on the mental aspects of getting in front of somebody. So the sort of mental preparation that one needs in order to step in front of a classroom, how to deal with an audience that is perhaps hostile or disengaged. Maybe the reason for this is that a lot of the teacher training these days tends to be focused on the student and on improving the student experience, and we are less concerned about the teacher's experience. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed. My colleagues, not within a particular institution, but in the wider sector, because I've got friends all over the place, a lot of them seem to be unhappy lately, and they voice this unhappiness. Maybe one of the reasons that people are unhappy is that our sense of achievement is affected by the fact that either it's not recognized or we have to deal with groups of people who are increasingly not interested in listening to us. And I think this begins to eat at your sense of self-worth, the contribution you're making, whether you're providing value and so on.
And coming back to imposter syndrome, the idea I don't belong here, that is such a sad feeling and undermines your idea of authenticity.
I do a lot of work on social media, and I realized something by accident, that one of the reasons why engagement in social media is so rewarding is because you get instant feedback. You can see statistics on what's happening about every single thing that you do. You can see what is the reach of your tweets. You can see whether people responded to you. You can check whether people are listening to this podcast and where they're from and how long they stayed on. You can see an endless amount of statistics for your LinkedIn posts and how many people you reached and what everybody thinks about it or whether it's been reshared. Now, this can make you feel better if it's going well, or it can make you worried if you don't have the reach you were expecting, but at least you're getting feedback. In our real life interactions, it's much more difficult to get feedback. If you're dealing with, if your, say, weekly constant interaction is a little bit bland, meaning students come into your classroom, perhaps not at full capacity, some of them do. While they're in there, some of them talk, but you don't have a great deal of engagement. This doesn't effectively communicate whether you're doing well or not. And sometimes you have to wait till the end of the year where the students submit some sort of feedback form that, again, very few will fill in. And I think this leaves you vulnerable because you're not exactly sure if you're providing value to the people that you're interacting with. And then at the end of the process, when you get that feedback, if you get a couple of nasty ones, then I think it can really shatter your confidence and make you doubt what you're doing. Maybe that explains why a lot of my colleagues are unhappy. Maybe it explains why so many people are kind of trying to find ways out of academia. If we're talking about people who are facing these situations, and probably you've got clients who are sort of experiencing this, how do you think a life coach can help them overcome these difficulties?
It's so difficult to answer this because the whole point in coaching is that it doesn't give general rules or information, but actually look at the individual person and see what's going on for them. In your example, that somebody doesn't get the feedback and the recognition, as a coach, you would start from the other end and saying, what is it really important for you? And probably under the recognition is something deeper. So you want recognition, but really you want to be a good teacher. So the good feedback is just a sign that you are a good teacher, but what you really want is a good teacher, to be a good teacher. And then saying, okay, what are the criteria for this? And is it only the attendance in the class which measures my teaching quality? Or can I think of can I be more authentic in thinking of what my criteria is? And I say, I have I once gave I think a brilliant presentation on a Zoom course where it was not about academia, but there were only 3 people and it wasn't shared widely. I still think it was brilliant, but I would hope it would have been shared widely. And the other thing is what I said earlier, is what exactly is it? What's knocking down your confidence? But go back of more what you want to achieve. What do you want to create with your teaching? And also other areas around it. I think what would create much more happiness and fulfillment is the focus on your purpose and what you achieve, and not on the others, the outside. And for me, this is the big problem with social media. It's all about getting a reaction. And you do something to get a reaction. You don't do something to do something. So you mentioned earlier that there was a podcast only 5 people heard in the beginning. Well, if it's one person changed their life, that's the biggest compliment you can get, even if you don't know about it. So maybe the focus is on quality. If you get a brilliant tutorial and there are 2 engaged students and they really get it, maybe that's enough. Who cares about the other 20 being on their phone and doing Facebook stuff?
Well, unfortunately, in my case, the university would care because now progression is the number 1 priority. But in a broader sense, if you reach somebody and you help them and you have an impact, even for one person, then yes, I think for most of my colleagues, I mean, in this environment, that would be sufficient validation.
And also what's really about in confidence, I think, is to remember it's not about you, or very rarely it's about you. So if a student is bored, it doesn't mean that you are boring. And if you give a boring class, it doesn't mean that you're a boring person. I think that is what we so often do, is to think it's about us. I'm a stupid person because I did something stupid, which is not. You did something stupid doesn't mean you are stupid.
That is very encouraging to hear, because I have a bad record of doing stupid things. On a personal level, what would you say are your plans for the future? Because I'm currently an academic. My plans for the future are to become a YouTuber when I grow up. Yeah, I'm going in the opposite direction of the children. The children start off wanting to be YouTubers and influencers, and then they get a career. I got the career first, and now I'm aspiring to retire into, being an influencer. How about you?
I'm a step ahead of you. Like you, I moved away from academia not because I wanted to move away from a negative situation, but I was fortunate enough to move towards something. So I found my dream job and then decided to move towards my dream job. So my biggest dream was to become a coach, and I did this. Even though I loved academia, there was something I loved more, and which I went. So I'm the YouTuber already. But if you say, what are my dreams? One is to bring my clients, especially academics, but all my clients, back the joy of their work. Because I mentioned when you started teaching in the early 20s and when you did your PhD, we were all so hungry. We wanted to become an academic. We were so proud to work for a university, and I couldn't wait to teach. And it's kind of all gone now. So if you look at academics, they're all drained. They have no time, no energy. Research is just it's just a scary thing because there's the REF, the next one. There's no much passion left. And I would love to help people to find this back again.
Yeah. Now, admittedly, part of it is external. Academia has changed, the country has changed, the environment has changed, and we need to acknowledge that this has happened. We've gone from a situation where there was ample funding and opportunity and expansion to a situation of kind of repeated redundancies and cutting down on costs and concerns and management imploring us to generate income. This has changed the nature of the job. So not everything is about how people think about themselves and their position within the environment, but the environment is different. Of course, adapting is important, and getting help in adapting effectively is essential in you bringing satisfaction back into your work. Definitely what you do is going to be helpful to a lot of people. And I'm going to provide in the description to this podcast the contact details for your website so people can get in touch, so they can discuss with you further. I think this has been super helpful. It's been a very, very helpful for me talking to you about these things, and it helps it clear it up in my head. And it's great to see from an external perspective because you've helped a lot of people with these issues. You're an expert in helping people regain their confidence.
And the joy in work.
Yes. And we certainly, academia at this day and age definitely needs a little bit of assistance.
And I absolutely agree. The external pressures are immensely. And there are now 3 ways you can do. You either can just suffer it until your retirement and sit it out, or you can change it and do something different, saying, that's not what I signed up. I want to go somewhere else. And I think there's nothing wrong with changing the career every 10 or 20 years. Or there's one saying, okay, I want to stay in academia, and I want to create change, to make the best of it as much as I can. We cannot abolish the REF or NSS or whatever, but there are things we can change.
If people want to support us, or if our listeners want to support me in finding a new career, they can subscribe to me on Spotify, and then I can fund my midlife crisis properly.
I think it's a very good idea. That's a very good call.
Yes. For 99p per month, then I can have a very limited midlife crisis, but I can still try. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you, Regina, for joining us today. I think this was awesome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for meeting your listeners and be with while they're cooking their pasta. Yeah.